All right, everyone, welcome back to the Rebellious Noise Pro Wrestling channel. My name is Scott, and we are here to break down Saturday night's main event, the first one in quite some time. Now, did it live up to expectations? We'll talk about that and much more right after this.
Welcome to the Rebellious Noise Pro Wrestling channel. On this channel, we bring you some great content from inside and outside of the squared circle. We will go through and offer some in-depth analysis of the biggest events of the year, as well as bringing you exclusive interviews with some of the industry's biggest names. There will also be live show reviews, in-depth features, and podcasts. So make sure you give that subscribe button a slam so you don't miss any of the action.
All right, once again, welcome back to the Rebellious Noise Pro Wrestling channel. And it was a jam-packed night, right? We talked on the build-up show earlier on about how this was going to be a strange show as far as pacing goes, and it certainly was that. But I think it made it feel really intense, if that makes sense. You had the 5-match card as you do on all the PLEs these days. And again, we were in two minds. Was it a PLE? Was it a glorified Raw? Was it somewhere in the middle? And I think it turned out to be exactly that. It felt like, in some ways, PLE quality, but jam-packed into 2 hours. Now, don't get me wrong. The matches weren't that long. It'd be interesting to see exactly how long each match was. I don't think many would have gone over 8 minutes. I'm not sure really. But a lot happened in the matches. It was kind of like they just kind of cut to the chase on every single match. Like there was a big start, and as you would expect with a TV match, really, you had a big kind of segment or a big kind of spot even to lead you into the break, and then you come back from the break, and it pretty much, picked up from there. A little bit of a down spell, and then all of a sudden the match was over, and you saw that in kind of abundance. Really, there's a few examples as we go throughout this show and talk about the kind of highlights from it in just a moment. But again, you are watching the Rebellious Noise Pro Wrestling channel. Thank you so much to everyone that's tuned in live and those that watch on demand as well. I want to know in the comments though, what did you think of tonight's event? Did you enjoy Saturday night's main event? Was it your first, or was it your, 31st? Are you excited for the one that's coming up in January? Of course, that one's going to have a little bit of a different feel to it, because of course it's going to be surely mainly promoting the Royal Rumble. This time round, it kind of took the place of a PLE, because there is no PLE, of course, in December. So, was you expecting a PLE quality card? Was you expecting a longer show? I certainly was, until I was on the build-up show and someone in the comments, Just Jay, I think it was, told us, no, it's a 2-hour card. So it was quite strange in that sense. I was really expecting it to feel like a PLE. And like I said, it kind of did, but it kind of didn't. It felt like a Raw on performance-enhancing drugs. Let's put it that Let's put it that way. It was so intense. Now, it started out with, of course, a fantastic intro that harked back to the days of Saturday night's main events, of course, of the past, of course, the early days in the 1980s. And it heavily featured Jesse the Body Ventura. Of course, he was a big part of tonight's show, being a kind of broadcaster at the beginning of the show, and then of course being a member of the 3-man booth at the very end with Michael Cole and Pat McAfee, who makes a big return to tonight's show as well. No Vince McMahon, which is understandable in today's day and age and what's going on as far as the climate of WWE at the moment, and well, we all know what's going on there, right? Understandable, but it was the first kind of time that I really noticed an absence. I think in the past few years where they've shown historic and nostalgic things, they've still kind of included, whether it be the soundbite of Welcome to WrestleMania or whatever it may be. This was the first kind of complete scrubbing, really, of Vince McMahon in WWE history, I felt, as far as a kind of nostalgic event that was clearly based on the past, where Vince would have not only had a big hand creatively, but a big hand on screen. Of course, he used to be a co-commentator with the likes of Jesse Ventura as well. So, and very much part of, well, pretty much all of the events, even when it had that resurgence in the 2000s. As I mentioned on the build-up, it was his son, Shane McMahon, of course, facing off against Shawn Michaels in a street fight. Very much part of a feud that linked up with Vince as well. So no showing of him here, but again, completely understandable. And a very heavy feature instead of Jesse Ventura. Of course, was always synonymous with this show, but it really kind of highlighted that on that package. Then you went from the 1980s footage into modern day footage in the same sort of style. And as far as presentation goes, I think this was an A+, really. You had the block logo, which, yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of it. I prefer the WWF version, but I understand why they're not using that as much these days. And you had the old school stage, really. Not much going on there, quite bare, but a nice kind of like throwback in the sense that you had that narrow runway and then security guards behind the wrestlers who, to be fair, didn't seem necessary because they weren't really doing much, right? And they weren't pushing people back or anything like that. I don't know if it was just kind of a symbolic thing to kind of remind us of those days where you would have rowdy fans getting close to people and stuff like that. But the entrance I noticed it most in was Chelsea Greens. Of course, we'll get to her match later on, but she does the whole kind of dodging the fans and you're disgusting, don't touch me. I was thinking to myself, well, if they're here to prevent that sort of stuff, why is she in the front 2, 3, 4 meters ahead doing that without their aid in the first place? So clearly it was a bit for show, right? But still, it added into what we saw as far as presentation goes. Heart Attack 35, he joined us on the build-up, is back with us on the instant reaction. Thank you so much for coming back, buddy. New title. Yes, we did see a new/old title, right? We saw the Winged Eagle make its return here, and Cody Rhodes proudly brought it to the ring and also spent some time with it after the match as well, which I was very shocked to see. As we mentioned on the build-up, I expected to see Cody win, but lift up the Winged Eagle and maybe the WWE current title and kind of, make a kind of a point of that, really, to kind of show that this is a one night only thing, but this is really where it lies in the new design. Now, of course, I love the original. I say original, there's been so many versions of the WWE title, but the one we saw tonight was one of the most famous, of course. Isn't going to be used going forward. Heart Attack 35, just so you're aware, it was a one night only thing. Cody Rhodes for years really has been talking about bringing that title back. Now, a lot of people would hope it would be a full-time thing, but if you talk about the marketing and the way WWE works today, I think it's understandable that they don't move into that direction, essentially, and they keep hold of what they've got today, because as a marketing device, the WWE title today is much better as far as branding goes. It's got a big WWE logo, and that's what they like, essentially. But yeah, we'll get to that match later on in the show. Let's start out at the very beginning, though. As I say, Pat McAfee makes a return. Jesse Ventura, I thought all night was pretty good, but he was understandably rusty, right? So it was really interesting to me because, especially in the main event where he was commentating, you could really tell that WWE had moved away from that style of having a heel commentator. We haven't really had a full heel in that sense for quite some time. I think Jerry the King Lawler and JBL are probably the closest we've had in the modern era. Even using that term modern era sounds odd when you're talking about the King, right? Because he had a quite long career on commentary, but even he hasn't been around for quite some time. But it really did hark back to those days of, again, the body being on commentary, right, with Gorilla Monsoon, which they also mentioned tonight. And it was really good. Like, he is still amazing and his performance was great, but it did highlight that WWE. It made me feel like I can imagine there were people backstage nervous about things he was saying. Like, he went into old school mode the way he usually does things, and they might be thinking at times of like, you're being a bit too harsh on Cody here. Because, of course, he was really healing it up. But, again, we'll touch on that match later on in the show. Just want to mention him here because, of course, he was a big part of the intro. He's been interviewed there. There was a nice little reference to Mean G with a red bow tie as well. He did a few times refer to Kevin Owens as Kevin Owen. It felt maybe maybe I was hearing that wrong, but it felt like that was the case until later on in the show, where I assumed during the break he got a memo. But again, look, completely understand that. I don't expect Jesse Ventura to be keeping up with the ins and outs of the WWE over the past X amount of years. He quite famously had a quite tumultuous relationship with the company. So understandably, he's not been keeping up with the product, it would seem. But he did a great job considering. Of course, you got that link between Dusty and Cody, knows that, of course. But you really did a great job, I felt, in kind of being in Kevin's corner, despite mixing up his name a few times, it would seem. But look, it's just like I'm mentioning it because it happened. And if I did a review without mentioning some of the kind of things that were missteps, it'd be sugarcoating, right? Let's be honest. We saw what we saw, we heard what we heard. But that doesn't take away from the fact that his performance was, again, a breath of fresh air in some ways. Let's get to the action in the ring, though. Let's start out with Pat McAfee announcing on air that Drew McIntyre had this crazy outburst that we mentioned on the podcast earlier on, which really suggests that this is all a worked shoot, you know, especially now that you know that Bálor is pretty much working alongside WWE, it seems, as well. Then we get to see a real example of what the presentation is going to be like. We see, as I hoped earlier on the build-up show, I said to Lucas, look, I want to see the blue shirts and the little black bow ties, and we got exactly that. Not only that, we also got what Lucas hoped we would see, in the sense that we saw the red, white, and blue ropes. Of course, the classic WWF look from the late 80s and early 90s, especially when it comes to these Saturday night main event shows. Sami Zayn exploded into this match, and this is a kind of common thing for all these matches. As I say, they're working around the TV schedule. Of course, you've got advertisements that have got to kind of break their way through every 15 minutes or so. So it started high impact straight away. Sami Zayn, very excited, gets on top of Drew McIntyre, and we start getting some hard-hitting action from the get-go. There's a beautiful sit-down springboard moonsault to the outside from Sami Zayn, and we end up quickly going to an ad break after there is a toss, essentially, onto the announce table from Drew McIntyre, and they show it in slow motion. It really felt like, again, we were going back to those days of presentation that you'd see in the late 80s. We saw that throughout the night, pretty much on most of the matches, but it did feel really weird at this point to go to an ad break. It felt out of place because, again, it felt like I was watching a PLE, but I wasn't at the same time. And it was at that point that it just felt noticeable that this is going to be a different kind of show. At this point as well, I noticed that the WWE's stream for this show, as we mentioned on the build-up, of course, in America, it's on Peacock. It's an NBC show traditionally. But around the world, it was on WWE's YouTube in many countries. And it was supposed to be the case here in the UK. I say supposed to, it still was. But you wouldn't know it if you just went to the channel. It doesn't seem like it was just a me problem. I saw others talk about this as well, but you couldn't actually find it under WWE's YouTube channel as a live stream. It was a hidden private link, essentially, or an unlisted video, I should say. If you had the link, you could go straight to it. Now, I went straight to it during the ad break to see what the ads were like, because I was watching on Peacock via means, and essentially I wanted to see what the difference was like when they went to the ad break. On Peacock, I'm watching American ads for fast food and health insurance, and then on the other side, YouTube, I saw a kind of blank screen that basically says, look, we're coming back soon. But in the meantime, before I got there, essentially, I couldn't actually find it. So again, I went to the channel, couldn't see it there. Eventually found the unlisted version. Before that, I actually went to the WWE Espanol channel. Thankfully, I'm about a year into Duolingo at the moment, so I understood a few things, but not as much as I'd like. But I could see on there, again, they were showing no ads, and that was the whole point. I was trying to see what the difference in presentation was between the international versions, essentially. But again, it seems like a real problem. WWE didn't have it actively on their page, and for a second, I thought it was because maybe of a VPN or something like that. Maybe I was acting as if I was in another country, but no, I wasn't. I was quite clearly, both physically and virtually, in the UK, and I couldn't see it on the UK version of the WWE YouTube channel. So that was quite strange. And again, I saw some people mention it online. So it'd be interesting to see how many people in the UK for sure, but maybe in other countries, missed out on this for a fair amount of time because they couldn't get to it via the WWE's YouTube page. Now, again, if you had the link, if you had saved it in the past, various sites were reporting about the fact it was going to be on WWE's YouTube page and they'd put the link up, you could get straight to it. But you know, when you go to a YouTube page and you see the red circle around their display icon, it wasn't there for WWE. When you went on their page, it wasn't there. When you went to live, it wasn't there. So I can only imagine the stress that caused international fans. But hey, let's get back to the good stuff, right? Let's get back to the action in the ring. There was a top rope white noise attempt from Drew McIntyre, which was reversed into a powerbomb by Sami Zayn. And then not long after that, we get to Claymore country, and it is Drew that takes over once again, hits the Claymore out of nowhere, and eventually gets the 3 count. Now, Drew, in my opinion, needed to look good here. We mentioned earlier on that this might even be a match that either doesn't start or gets to about 5 minutes. When Drew's music hit first, I realized that cannot be the case. We can't open the show with a non-contest, right? So to my surprise, they had an actual match. Now, it wasn't super long, don't get me wrong, because of the format, but long enough, essentially, and way longer than I ever expected. Not long after this, we got another advert, this time for WWE Mayhem, which was a weird thing, because as a child of the 90s, I kept thinking of WCW Mayhem on the PS1. I was like, is this some sort of sequel? Mayhem 2 on PS2, and it never came to be. No, it turns out it's some sort of mobile game or something like that. But there you go. Then after that, going back into the 1980s now, we had Tito Santana, Rich Herring, and Jimmy Hart. Of course, Jimmy Hart, the famous manager, Tito Santana, WWE Hall of Fame wrestler, and Rich Herring, who pretty much was a big part of the WWE global or national expansion, I should say, in the 1980s, and of course laid the foundation for the company as we know it today. So it's a nice little nod back to those important figures in the company's history right there. Then we get a really cool promo video for the women's title match, basically highlighting why this match is taking place. Don't get me wrong, you get that at PLEs, but this one was edited in a slightly different style, I felt. Earlier on the night, Pat McAfee also said, look, there's going to be a lot of old school wrestling fans tuning in tonight, and they're going to be seeing something they haven't seen for quite some time and something quite different to them. So that was an interesting note and interesting to see the way they promote this match. They also did mention in commentary that, I think I got this right, that Liv hasn't lost a singles match since March, which you wouldn't know it by the way they've booked her. But saying that, this match was booked exactly how I wanted Liv to be booked. Now, as much as I like Liv and I love Rhea as well, we talked earlier on the build-up stream, and as we've done a few times recently, about the fact that Liv has just looked like a cowardly heel a little too much. And now that she's got Raquel by her side, it didn't seem like she was going to get a simple win anytime soon. Well, I'll be damned, because she got one tonight. Now, it started off again with fast-paced action, straight to the point. We had the incredible kind of sequence, really, where you had the 3 roll through German suplexes by Io Sky. Now, towards the end of the match, you saw a knee go right in Liv's nose, busting it. You saw the blood coming out of her nose at the end of the match as well. But it was great to finally see this convincing win from Liv Morgan. Like I say, I think she needed it. And you know what? Even the busted nose probably added to that as well. She hit a Oblivion, nice little spike onto Io with the move as well. And then eventually she makes her way up the ramp, and she looked to be in some pain with her nose issue, and honestly looked to me like she was close to tears. And then Rhea's music hit, and she has to get back into kind of mean mug face, you know. She has to be quite angry here. It's a little awkward though, I have to be honest. I think it's the kind of thing where if Liv was in the ring, it would have suited a little bit more, but ultimately they wanted the face-to-face, and I felt it was a little strange because there's been a few times recently where Rhea's come out, where it's been a return or kind of just come out and be the badass, really, that her music's hit, and I'm like, is she going to do the stomp? And no, of course she's not, because she's, you know, she means business. But this time she like actually did the stomp next to the person she hates, who like have been getting at each other like wildly for the past few months, yet they are tame enough to allow a taunt and a face-to-face in a cramped environment on a semi-stage slash entryway where the guardrails are very close. It just felt a little too cramped. You know, it wasn't a visual I think that they expected it to be. It kind of led more into thinking, why are they not just going at each other? Don't they hate each other? Why are they posing? So that was a little odd, but hey, nice to see Rhea on the show. And of course, as Lucas said earlier on, it does seem that that's where we're going to go next to finally wrap up this feud. Speaking of the Judgment Day, we next had the triple threat match containing two former members of the old Judgment Day, I should say, running buddies of Damian Priest and Finn Bálor, no more, both trying to go for Gunther's WWE World Heavyweight Championship. Now, as we said earlier on, triple threat traditionally is a get out of jail free clause, right? You can kind of find your way around having your champion being pinned if you want to take the title off of him. Also, you can have a full guy if you don't want it to be the champion, you want to be someone else. And I guess that's kind of, I said the same thing twice there, really. But essentially, that doesn't happen. We do get a good match. Another example of a fast-paced match. Starts out really big with Priest having a dive outside the ring. But this time, no slow-mo. It was like he had got the memo, like, do a big move, jump over the rope, like you'd seen in pretty much all the matches until this point. But it was no slow-mo. That was a little odd. When the cameras come back on, though, you do get Priest again, highlighting his incredible athleticism, this time going up top and not flying down just yet, because he walks across the ropes and does old school, just like The Undertaker, until, unlike The Undertaker, he finishes it up with a crossbody, which was quite interesting to see. Gunther eventually would hit a very, very hard-hitting powerbomb on Damian Priest, the former World Heavyweight Champion, onto the steel steps before getting back into the ring himself, hitting Finn Bálor with a double-legged drop kick and then a powerbomb to capture the victory. Now, this was, again, a fun, fast-paced match. Disappointing in the sense that I kind of had started to come around to the idea of Finn Bálor winning the title here, or something big happening on the show. If we're completely honest, guys, it wasn't very noteworthy. It was a fun show, but no real storyline progression other than the next match, of course, which we'll get to in just a moment. But as far as the two men's world titles, of course, they wouldn't be changing hands. And this match saw three guys going at it in a kind of mix of a storyline that they've all been kind of working around recently that didn't really tell us anything as far as where they're going next, but still was an enjoyable match and some good performances in this one as well. Now, before we get to the next match, we had a few backstage shots where we had Kevin Owens wearing the Canadian Dream shirt as opposed to, of course, the American Nightmare. And then you had the women's title, the US women's title, I should say, being paraded backstage before the next match, of course, which would be for that title itself. Chelsea Green taking on Michin. Really interesting that on commentary they actually mentioned the fact that two of the women in this match are both former TNA champions. Talking about the Knockouts title history here, which is a nice little kind of nod to not only TNA but also the history of both of these women wrestlers, and really just highlighting the fact that although in this company they've never really had the opportunity to win the big one, if you will, they have won stuff elsewhere. They have made waves elsewhere, and it's the reason why they were, you know, within the crosshairs essentially of WWE, why they were brought on board eventually. So it was nice to have that kind of link back to the past. I feel like that would have done better when it wasn't for a title, because again, it would kind of show the importance of their careers previous to WWE. But at the same time, the whole point of it here was to highlight that these women are kind of essentially good enough to be champions, even though we've never shown you that here in WWE. trust me, they can be champs. And there we go. Of course, one of them would ultimately walk away with a title, but I wanted to make it seen that both of these women would be believable as the champion, I feel. And that's why they clearly were keen to talk about their title history. But a nice little nod again towards TNA and the Knockouts division as well. Now, Chelsea Green came out in a cool little attire, as you would expect, with her own face emblazoned all over it. And it was a decent match. Again, just like all the matches on this card, really. Fast-paced, got to a big spot before the ads, come back, and they picked up where they left off eventually. And Michin at the end was distracted by Piper Niven. Chelsea slapped Michin as she sat on top of the turnbuckle. I think she kind of did like a flip over and then landed into the position to hit the unpretty her, and then got the free count as well. As I said with Lucas earlier on, I really wouldn't have been offended by either woman walking away with a title. I think both of them have done enough work in WWE in the past few years to deserve a position like this. And it was a real nice moment here, of course, for Chelsea Green. Hopefully, Michin will be getting a shot at that title again. As Lucas said earlier on, you'd imagine that this would be a rematch, maybe the next Saturday night's main event, or SmackDown or an PLE or something like that, and maybe Michin takes it there. And I do think she does deserve, again, now that you've got these mid-card titles, it's about time to give not only veterans like Natalya a shot, but also some of these I wouldn't say up and comers, but basically people that aren't considered 4 horsewomen a shot at a title, right? So yeah, I do hope that Michin does get this title at some point soon. And yeah, a decent match from both of them. A very quick one, I assume was the quickest match of the night, which is always a shame when you say that about a women's match, especially because it was for the new title. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe it wasn't the case, but either way, a nice moment at the end there for Chelsea Green. Now, Lillian, of course, did the announcement, not only for her entrance, but also for the victory. And she did the old Chelsea Green that Samantha Irvin was famous for. Which I'm not sure about because Samantha did it in the style of Chelsea, it felt. So you could argue that it's not like copying Samantha. I guess it is, but it's not, if that makes sense. But yeah, Lillian's not bad at it. Look, always like Lillian Garcia's work. But I don't know, that moment you think, that's one of those where you could look at it and go, if Samantha did that, that would have made a lot more sense. Or don't remind us of Samantha. I don't know. Odd one. Because it is very much part of Chelsea's character. And the whole point of that announcement is because it is basically, I guess, done in Chelsea's own style, if that makes sense. Anyway. After that match, we get some more legends shown in the audience. We were speculating earlier on in the build-up show that you might see some backstage segments. We did not. We had no time for any of that. Earlier on, we mentioned that Jimmy Hart was there. I assumed that he would be in the backstage segment for sure because he had mentioned being on the show or being approached by WWE at least to be on the show. So when I heard that, I thought, it'd be some sort of backstage shenanigans. Didn't happen. Really shocked to see that. But again, it just shows how stacked this card was. There were 5 big matches with, only 2 hours to cram it in with ads. And as Just Jack said earlier on in the build-up show, that was always going to be a challenge, essentially. By the way, thank you to everyone that did join us in the build-up. I know not all of you were able to join us, but if you do want to get round to jump in on that original stream, then we'd appreciate that as well. Of course, it was all about hyping us up and getting us in the mood to Saturday night's main event. But if you do go back and watch it, you will see that myself and Lucas dived into a lot of interesting topics as well beyond tonight's, I was going to say PLE, it's not PLE. But yeah, I know a lot of you guys do go back and watch the build-up shows, even if you didn't manage to watch it live. And we appreciate that because, again, I know a lot of the conversations on there do include topics that go beyond the PLE or the show, at least, that we're covering. Getting back to Saturday night's main event, though, as I say, in the audience, you saw Coco Beware and Greg the Hammer Valentine. Then we do get Jesse Ventura on the commentary, and there's this nice little intro where they're giving him a lot of praise, and as a heel, he's taking it and kind of forcing his way in there as well, saying, "You guys earn money because of me," essentially. And then they... Pat does his little segment where he acts like I guess an analyst, and he kind of draws up lines, arrows, and circles to kind of say, "Hey, this is what's going on," like you would in American football, like you also get in the Premier League or Match of the Day, for example. And then he kind of basically says, "Look, what a man of style! The shades, the 5 feather boas, and then the snakeskin vest." To which Ventura basically says, "Yeah, you know what this snake was called? Damian." Now, as soon as he says Damian, I thought, "Oh, yeah, Jake the Snake's snake. That's a joke he's making there." But it felt like Michael Cole, understandably, was so eager to get to the next point, he just missed that and went, "Oh, is that his name?" or something like that. I can't remember what it was, but he basically seemed we didn't acknowledge what he was clearly trying to say, and I couldn't tell if that was because Michael just missed the joke, or if or a mixture of the two, really. Maybe he was also trying to just rush into the next segment, and they didn't actually want to draw attention to that kind of joke, because that creates it opens up a can of worms, right? You know, are WWE basically saying that they allowed a wrestler to skin another wrestler's pet snake? You know, that's not really the kind of thing you can get away with these days. If you're portraying it as legit, at least. So this is where I felt like those two words clashed, as I mentioned earlier on. Jesse Ventura was a great commentator tonight. Once he really got into his groove, and he kind of again started to refer to Kevin Owens as Kevin Owens rather than Kevin Owen, I think it really highlighted just how much we do miss heel commentators and how great someone like Jesse is on the mic. Really enjoyable. And this is coming from, again, a guy that I assume hasn't watched much of the product recently. And you think if that guy was working there every day, every week, like you get with Michael Cole and not so much Pat McAfee, but of course, when he is there at least, and the rest of the crew essentially, then how good would Jesse be? You know, an incredible performer, both in the ring and on the mic. And it was really nice to get that kind of nostalgic boost. And he mentioned Saturday night's main event coming up in January, so you would imagine he might be part of that as well, which would be really nice to see. It'd be interesting to see how much they do integrate him into storyline now, whether or not, you know, if he pays a bit more attention. And again, this isn't a knock on him. I don't expect him to have been kept up with the product. I think the fact that he was brought in recently and clearly had done enough research to kind of, you know, build off of what he already knew, because he is a legend of the game, but also build off of the current storyline. You know, he talks about Cody Rhodes getting injured. He talked about Cody's relationship with his dad and Kevin Owens and how that's gone sour and stuff like that. I can only imagine how good Jesse would be with the current product if he really immersed himself within it as well. So, I mean, I'm really interested to see if he does return for the next one, what his performance will be like, and if it'll start up showing some of the current guys, essentially. Not to say that any of them are bad. We're in a good place at the moment, I feel, with commentators. But when you bring back a classic like Jesse the Body Ventura, then it can only, you know, help everybody else up their game, essentially. Now, a big thing going into this match was the segment that we saw online with Triple H giving Cody Rhodes a little present that was in a big old case, shining a big old gold light on his face. And Triple H said, "Look, this is one night only." Now, we all knew what it was, right? It was the Winged Eagle title, and it was amazing to finally see it on WWE TV again and representing that very championship and the heritage behind it. Now, of course, it's a one night only thing, as we say. I personally do think that at the end they should have had the WWE title, the current one, to kind of have them both on screen to not cause too much confusion, I guess. because I think there are going to be people out there at the moment that just assume that's the new belt, even though Michael Cole explained what it was. There's not really time to explain that it's not the belt going forward, if that makes sense. So I think it would be good for Cody to hold them both at the end and kind of jokingly, kiss them both and merge them together or something like that. But it wasn't the case. It was very clear, I think, when this title was unveiled that Kevin Owens wasn't going to win, which was a shame. As I said earlier on, I think he's been doing such amazing work over the past few years, and the past few months in his heel run as well has been incredible. And he really deserves a title. And to shake things up would have been quite fun as well. Speaking of fun, though, we did have a good, fun match. But before we talk about that, going back to the title itself, I love the fact that they mentioned Reggie Parks, the designer and creator, essentially, of the Winged Eagle title. They also mentioned the history of the Winged Eagle, and that was retired in '98 by Stone Cold Steve Austin, who essentially then brought in the Big Eagle as well, which is my personal favorite WWE title. I've got to say, I love the Winged Eagle, but the Big Eagle, I don't know. Maybe it's just my era. But I love the Art Deco style on both of them as well. And then the Undisputed title, which really, really is an unsung hero of WWE titles as well. Sludge Sports says SmackDown 2.0. Is that your thoughts on the show itself, Sludge? Is that what you're saying? Felt like a glorified Raw or SmackDown or something like that. I mean, I felt like it was, but like pace, like it was so weirdly in between, right? It felt like a PLE crammed into a Raw or a SmackDown, which meant it was way more exciting than a Raw or SmackDown, but like not enough if you compare it to PLE, and therefore kind of too like it felt chaotic. I don't know, maybe it's just me. But yeah, let me know out there, guys, what you thought of the pacing of the show. Going back to the main event, though, we had a lot of references to Randy Orton. Randy Orton's backdrop was kind of copied by Kevin Owens onto the announce table. That was the spot that took us to the break in this match. I said that every single one of them had them right. Then again, as we come back from the break, my next note was basically that Ventura's heel work was just so good. Cody hits an RKO on the table, another announce table spot, and again, it doesn't break. And again, it's a Randy Orton reference, and you got to be thinking Randy Orton's going to factor back into the storyline very soon, and surely is going to turn on Cody Rhodes. Hopefully, we'll see that coming soon. A great fisherman's buster from the top rope by Kevin Owens. Charles Robinson accidentally knocked out in his beautiful blue shirt. A stunner is hit by Kevin Owens. The ref can only get to 2. The second ref, of course, that comes in. This is when you really start getting Ventura screaming, basically saying, oh, it was his fault. It was that person's fault. He's doing this. That's wrong. And all the kind of shenanigans used to get in WWF 1980s wrestling. Then Cody accidentally takes out the referee as well. It goes for Cody Cutter, takes out the spare referee, and then you do get KO trying to take advantage, as the heel often does, with a steel chair, but he misses and crossroads onto the chair from Cody Rhodes to take advantage of the situation, and he hits the 3 count. Now this, of course, Lisa Ventura hyping up the fact that Kevin Owens was cheated essentially because the bad guy didn't actually use the chair. It was the good guy who used the chair. Classic storytelling. Again, feels very 90s, 80s. I'm sure Kevin Owens and Cody Rhodes would appreciate Ventura's commentary in this match. But yeah, that's how we wrapped up the show. Essentially, Cody Rhodes does lift up the Winged Eagle title, and that brings Saturday night's main event to a close. But all in all, again, a really good show. One that I felt pacing-wise was a little confusing, if I'm completely honest with you. I would like to see Saturday night's main event in January be a 3-hour show without ads, or a 3-hour show with ads, or something like that, or a 2-hour show without ads. Essentially, there needed to be a little bit more for me. Maybe I'm just not used to TV wrestling anymore. I don't watch Raw and SmackDown live, so I don't see the the ads or anything like that. I pretty much catch up with highlights and stuff like that, and it's the PLEs that I'm watching live. So the pacing felt completely off of me anyway. But when I do watch Raw and I do watch SmackDown, and it is live on air with ads, it's way slower than this. I mean, I was massively shocked that there was no in-ring segment as far as on the microphone. You didn't have like a Grayson Waller show or anything like that. There was no promos time for anyone. There was nothing backstage. There was no Legends kind of party or anything like that. Those kind of weird segments they used to do in the WWE old school shows. It was just to the point, which is a good thing. You know, it really felt like a wrestling show, which is cool. But at the same time, I do feel like they could have spread it out a little bit more. It was presented like a PLE, but didn't deliver in that sense. But going to the wrestlers themselves, they kind of over delivered. You know, they fit so much into these short, strict time keys that they had to fit between advertisements and stuff like that. So all in all, a good show. I really do hope you guys enjoyed it as well. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of the night, and what your favorite match was, and what you thought maybe could have been a little bit better. We didn't get really any surprises. Yes, we got the Legends being shown in the audience, but we didn't get anything with regards to maybe Goldberg, as we touched on earlier on. We didn't get a return from Charlotte Flair, no Becky Lynch or anything like that. And of course, a lot of big names missing from this show as well. No Roman Reigns, no CM Punk. But at the same time, that really does just show off the depth of the roster at the moment. You don't need them all, and you still get a fantastic show. Again, I really enjoyed this. Hope you guys did as well. We'll try and be back for the next Saturday night's main event on this channel, but we will definitely be back covering Raw's debut on Netflix on January the 6th as well. We'll also have a build-up show for that. As I mentioned earlier on, we did a build-up show for tonight's show. So if you haven't already, please go back and check that out. Yes, of course, we were here to hype up Saturday night's main event, but as I mentioned earlier on, myself and Lucas went into depth on a lot of conversations surrounding the WWE landscape at the moment as well. You've been watching the instant reaction, and I thank you so much for joining us. If you haven't already, please subscribe. We are the Rebellious Noise Pro Wrestling channel, and not only do we do podcasts and live instant reaction reviews like this, but we've also had the great opportunity to interview WWE stars such as Finn Bálor, such as members of Imperium, and also had the great honor of interviewing Big E when he was WWE champion as well. Of course, a very, very heartbreaking storyline going on with Big E at the moment. But if you want to see us talk about much happier times, then go back and check our interview out with him as well. Once again, I've been Scott. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight, and a real big amount of appreciation really for everyone that tuned in for our build-up show earlier on. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you in the future on this channel once again for the Rebellious Noise Pro Wrestling channel. Goodbye.
Welcome to the Rebellious Noise Pro Wrestling channel. On this channel, we bring you some great content from inside and outside of the squared circle. We will go through and offer some in-depth analysis of the biggest events of the year, as well as bringing you exclusive interviews with some of the industry's biggest names. There will also be live show reviews, in-depth features, and podcasts. So make sure you give that subscribe button a slam so you don't miss any of the action.